NASCAR Cup Series Managing Director Brad Moran might have just leaked where Ryan Preece is headed in 2025. NASCAR has been listed as a potential series that could race in Saudi Arabia in the not-so-distant future, and there's been a lot of wild rumors surrounding John Hunter Nemechek's future at Legacy Motor Club. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them channels really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Connor Zilich's 2024 Jarrett scheme that we'll see this weekend or next weekend at Phoenix. This scheme looks really good in my opinion. I love the colors on it. It looks absolutely incredible, and I'm looking forward to see it on the racetrack at Phoenix. It looks really great in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2024 Colgate scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. Scheme's alright in my opinion. I do like the colors on it. It's one of the better JTG Doherty schemes we've seen so far. It's alright. We'll see what he can do this weekend in that car at Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Neely's 2024 Optic Game Bridge scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. This looks, of course, very, very similar to the one that Corey LaJoie's ran in the past. It does look alright for sure. We'll see what Justin Neely can definitely do in this scheme this weekend at Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2024 jockey scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. This is a different looking jockey scheme for this upcoming week. They've actually changed it up quite a bit. They've had an American looking one. They've kind of changed it up to be a little more blue. It's very interesting, and it does look all right in my honest opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joey Logano's 2024 Shell PPR scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. This scheme is definitely for a good cause. It looks really awesome. It's for a really good cause for sure. Definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Martin Truex Jr.'s 2024 Thank You Martin Auto Owners Insurance scheme that we'll see this weekend at Martinsville. We've been starting to see a lot more of the special paint schemes for Martin Truex Jr. I think they did a really great job on this, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Martinsville. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2025 Kubota scheme that we'll see in 2025. This scheme looks great. It's better than the 2024 edition. Trackhouse has some really nice looking paint schemes for 2025, including SVG's scheme for next year. This one looks really great. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in the 2025 season. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 Tableau scheme that I believe we'll see this weekend at Martinsville in some races when he heads over to DJM Racing in 2025. This looks alright in my opinion. I think that Alf Prime did a really solid job on it. It does look pretty solid, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend and throughout 2025 when, of course, Ryan Ellis will be moving over to DGM next year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Wendy's. As it was confirmed earlier today that Wendy's will sponsor Shane Van Gisbergen this weekend at Martinsville. He'll have a nice looking scheme. It's blue. It's going to have some of the Wendy's look and some of the other things on it. This looks absolutely incredible. One of the best paint schemes I think we've seen so far this year. We've seen some really good looking ones for SVG in the Cup Series, and now we'll get the chance and opportunity to race it in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. While it seems like every time he has Wendy's on the car, he doesn't run as well, I think that changes this week, and I think he'll have a very solid run for sure with this paint scheme. It does look great. He'll look to close out the year on a really, really strong note. I do think the scheme looks really amazing, and I think they absolutely set the world on fire with a great looking paint scheme for this weekend at Martinsville. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about 2-1 Nicotine Pouches. As it was announced yesterday that 2-1 Nicotine Pouches will sponsor NBM Motorsports for the final two races of 2024. They'll sponsor Josh Bilicki this weekend at Martinsville, and then they'll sponsor Chad Fincham in the final race at Phoenix. While it's a little controversial for the sponsorship type they're bringing in, it's also good to see they do have sponsorship for the final couple races. This means, like I said, the NBM Motorsports will get the chance and opportunity to come back on the racetrack for a few more races. We don't know what the official plans are for the team going into 2025, but I do think these schemes actually look really great, by the way, and I think it's awesome to see that they've got a new sponsor. They look really great. We'll see what they can do. They're probably not going to be very competitive, but we'll see if they can prove me wrong and run really well for sure this weekend at Martinsville and Phoenix in a couple weeks from now. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Garrett Smithley. As it was announced yesterday that Garrett Smithley will drive the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing this weekend at Martinsville. Garrett Smithley's made select starts with Alpha Prime Racing so far this year. He had originally driven for JD Motorsports. We know that JD Motorsports declared bankruptcy, so Garrett's been trying to find a ride for 2025. Now, there is a chance he could, of course, end up with the team in 2025. We don't know at this point, but it's good to see him getting a chance and opportunity. Realistically, I'm not expecting Garrett Smithley to set the world on fire. Alpha Prime showed some decent speed this past weekend at Homestead Miami Speedway with Brennan Poole, so maybe he can get a top 20 or top 25. I'm not really expecting that, to be honest with you, but it's a good opportunity nonetheless for Garrett, and I hope he can do a really solid job. I think he does have a pretty solid and good opportunity with Alpha Prime Racing for sure this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Preston Pardus. As it was announced earlier today that Preston Pardus will drive the 50 for Pardus Racing this weekend at Martinsville. I believe this will be the first time that Pardus Racing, maybe ever, has driven on an oval track. Usually when you see Pardus Racing, they tend to run the road course races. But Preston Pardus, who I think got an opportunity maybe to run the Mazda MX-5 Cup race, if I'm not mistaken, will get the chance and opportunity to race in Martinsville. Every time Preston Pardus gets behind the wheel of a car, he usually outperforms in that equipment. Remember, Pardus Racing does get ECR engines, so it does help their program. I think Preston's got a chance for top 20 or top 25. Now, I do think there is someone that will be going home this weekend, so they have to qualify their way in, but if they could bring the pace and speed they've had sometimes on the road courses, I could definitely see him having a good chance and opportunity to qualify really well, and I do expect that Preston Pardus will have the pace and will have the speed to contend. I expect some really good runs, and I think he'll do a really solid and great job with Pardus Racing for sure this weekend at Martinsville Speedway with the organization. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dylan Lupton. As it was confirmed earlier today and reported by Joseph Strigley from TobyChristie.com that Dylan Lupton will drive the 02 for Young's Motorsports this weekend at Martinsville. This means that Dylan Lupton will be doing double duty, as remember, he is driving a 15 car for AIM Racing for the final couple races, taking over Haley Deegan. Of course, will be going to Indy NXT in 2025. Dylan Lupton will get some opportunities and chances, though I don't expect him to be very competitive in the Truck Series or probably even the Xfinity Series as well. But getting that experience definitely doesn't hurt for sure. Realistically, I think the 02 truck does have a decent position. The owner's points currently at the moment, I think it's in the top 30. So he's in a really solid position, though there is a full field for the Truck Series, and someone is going home this weekend for the Truck Series race. So this truck definitely needs to qualify very well. I think realistically, the top 25, though, is very possible for Dylan Lupton, but I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire. But I do think it's a really solid and good opportunity. Hopefully, Dylan Lupton can have a solid chance and opportunity to be competitive. We'll see what he can do with Young's Motorsports this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Maya Snyder. As it was confirmed yesterday that Maya Snyder will drive the 91 for DGM Racing this weekend at Martinsville with Treetop as the sponsor. Maya Snyder made his second Xfinity Series start last weekend or a couple weekends ago at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And if I'm not mistaken, he finished inside of the top 30. Now, I believe he's replacing Kyle Weatherman for this weekend. I don't think Kyle is driving. He did, of course, miss Las Vegas. We don't know what Kyle Weatherman's plans currently at the moment for 2025 are, but there's a chance he may not be back with the team. As for Maya Snyder, I expect Mike to be okay. He's actually been solid at Martinsville in the past. He also has been sent into the shadow realm by Austin Hill. He got into a fight with him a couple years ago in 2022. So maybe we'll see him not get into a fight this time around. We'll see what he can do this weekend. D-Jim's had some solid pace and speed throughout the year, though they've also struggled at times throughout the season. So we'll see what Maya Snyder can do. Realistically, I think for Maya Snyder, a top 20 would be a really great day. It's going to be a very competitive field, though, but I do think that Maya Snyder does have an outside chance for a top 30. We'll see what he can do, though, for sure this weekend at Martinsville. I think he's got a solid chance and opportunity to have a competitive run this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about most popular driver voting. As NASCAR confirmed yesterday, the most popular driver voting for the NASCAR Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series has been officially open, and it goes through November the 21st. Now, here are my predictions for the Cup Series. I think that Kyle Larson is going to put up a solid fight. I think Kyle Busch will put up a really good fight. Bubba Wallace probably not. But I think Chase Elliott most likely will end up winning the most popular driver award for Cup, even though I do think there's a chance and opportunity that Kyle Larson could put up a good fight. For the Xfinity Series, I think it's going to be Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG's been the most popular driver this year. He's been extremely popular every win he's gotten, especially on my YouTube channel. We've seen very good viewership for those when he goes to win. And then for the Truck Series, maybe Grant Enfinger. That's who I think has a really good chance. But Raj is also popular, so I think it's wide open. Obviously, Haley Deegan, if she was still competing full-time in Xfinity, I think she'd have a chance. But I think that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to win the Xfinity Most Popular Driver Award over Justin Allgaier this year. I think there's going to be a new king here. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that, though, and see who ends up winning the Most Popular Driver Voting Award. But I do think most likely who I said wins the Most Popular Driving Award will end up being the drivers who end up for sure. We'll see when that happens. It'll probably be announced during the banquet. We'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to whoever will win the Most Popular Driver Voting Award for 2025. I think that Ross Chastain has an outside chance to win the Cup, but I think it will likely go to Chase Elliott on the NASCAR Cup Series side of things. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Irwindale Speedway. As it was announced earlier today, that Irwindale Speedway will officially close, and they will have their final race on December the 21st. Now, according to Charlie Craw, who does a lot of PR stuff for ARCA, is one of the people who works higher up, I think, in the ARCA side of things, he did confirm that there is going to be an ARCA West type of race that is going to be an exhibition event that is going to close out the race here at Irwindale Speedway. This is definitely really unfortunate, but there's been rumors circulating about Irwindale Speedway's potential closure for the last couple of years, unfortunately. Really, the last couple months especially, there have been a lot of rumors. But it's such a shame to see another Southern California track maybe going away. We already know there's a lot of talk about Auto Club's future. We know NASCAR said it. They don't even know what the plan is for Auto Club Speedway at the moment. People have been speculating that NASCAR will never end up going back to Auto Club Speedway. I still think there's a chance that it could end up happening for sure. But there's a chance it might also not end up happening. And losing another track like Irwindale Speedway, which has put on some really good racing, and people have been wanting to go there. But the problem is, you got to think about it as well. There's a lot of people around the track that, again, they probably should know what they're getting into when they move out there. But a lot of people don't like the noise, and they basically wanted the track gone. And that's why the track is unfortunately closing. It's such a shame that people that don't know anything about racing are the ones making decisions for racetracks that have a lot of history. There's been a lot of drivers who won at Irwindale Speedway. We've seen a lot of chaos at the track, and a lot of big-name drivers have come through the ranks over at Irwindale Speedway. It's such a shame to see this track closing. I really hope a lot of NASCAR Cup drivers maybe can go out there and race at Irwindale one last time before the track officially closes. We lost Myrtle Beach a couple years ago, and now, unfortunately, Irwindale Speedway is going to be gone, and it is really sad to see and unfortunate to see that Irwindale Speedway is going to be gone. It is definitely very unfortunate to see that this is happening, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about qualifying for the Cup Series in 2025. There's obviously been a lot of frustration in regards to this, especially this past weekend where the NASCAR Cup and Xfinity Series coverage was on the NBC Sports app and was not on TV. And a lot of fans and people in the industry did express their frustration in regards to that. And someone asked Bob Parks a question in regards to the Cup Series qualifying for 2025. Now, Bob Parker's based report on something we kind of know at this point, but just a reminder, for the first half of 2025, all of Cup Series qualifying will be on Amazon. The only time you will not see it on Amazon is the Busch Light Clash, the Daytona 500, and the All-Star Race. Fox has exclusive rights to that for that event. Every other event, like, of course, going to Dakota next year early, Homestead early next year, qualifying will be on Amazon. And True TV will have the second half, including for, I believe, the championship race. I could be wrong on that, but I believe for the championship race as well, it is going to be on True TV. At least it's going to be a little more consistent. I know that people are going to be looking for different networks to go to, and there's a lot to kind of keep up with there. But also, it's kind of straightforward, at least on the Cup side of things for next year. Now, Xfinity and trucks may be a little bit different. Of course, Xfinity will be on the CW. Actually, it will be pretty straightforward for the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series will probably be a little bit unstraightforward straightforward next year, but the Truck Series has been getting less and less respect from NASCAR at this, not from NASCAR, but of course Fox at this point, which we'll get to here in just a minute. But I think that it's kind of straightforward for the Cup Series next year, a little bit more. Yes, it'll still be a little inconsistent at times for the Cup Series qualifying, but you'll have a lot more of an easy time finding a way to watch Cup qualifying coverage next year, which I'll be able to cover that throughout the year as well, which I think is really, really exciting. So nonetheless, for sure, good to see, and I'm glad to see it's kind of consistent. I know some fans are kind of frustrated about all the different networks they're going to have to go to, but I think it is pretty consistent, and I think it is pretty straightforward in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jamie Little. As it was reported earlier tonight by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that Jamie Little was on the Off-Track show with James Hinchcliffe and I believe Alexander Rossi. And she says if she believes she'll be part of the Indy 500 booth in 2025 on Fox's coverage. Now, Jamie Little has currently been covering the ARCA Series and select NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series races, though majority of events in 2024. Now, here are my thoughts on Jamie Little. I think Jamie Little is an excellent pit reporter. One of the best pit reporters that NASCAR and probably Motorsports has had over the course of the last quarter of the century. My problem is that the last few years, they've been trying to put her in the booth to be the lead commentator. And in my honest opinion, she has not lived up to the potential of being a really good lead commentator. And especially for the Indy 500, you need to bring that energy and excitement that someone like a Lee Diffie brings. Lee Diffie knows how to call a race, or even Alan Bestick for that matter. I know there have been rumors about Alan Bestick potentially being the lead commentator for Indy 500 coverage in the Indy NASCAR Series next year. But Jamie Little, in my opinion, she would fit a lot more being a pit reporter. Her being put up in the booth would not be good for IndyCar. I think a lot of people have seen her coverage this year. She's just so monotone and just all over the place with the coverage. If she was just on pit road, I think a lot of people will be happy with her being part of the coverage. The problem is when you start hearing things like this where she might be part of the main booth going into next year, I think that is really disappointing here because while I do like Jamie Little, she is not a good lead commentator. She has not lived up to the potential that she has. I don't think she's done a really, really good job. And in my honest opinion, I personally do not want to see her be the lead commentator for Fox coverage going into next year. Unfortunately, it sounds like there's a chance of it happening, and I think it'd be really disappointing and really frustrating if she got to be the lead commentator because she has not done a good job being the lead commentator for NASCAR's coverage and ARCA's coverage in recent years, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hettinger Racing. As it was announced and confirmed earlier today that Hettinger Racing has officially bought Brett Holmes Racing's assets and they will be competing in the Truck Series for the final two races of 2024, and they plan to run full-time in the Cars Tour, the ARCA West Series once again, and they plan to run full-time in the Craftsman Truck Series in 2025. For the final two Craftsman Truck Series races of this year, Brett Moffitt has only made a few select starts with Tri-Garage in the number 1 truck this year and made one start with Joe Gibbs Racing in Xfinity. He'll be the driver for the final two races of this year. This is absolutely huge. For those who do not know who Hettinger Racing is a team that is owned by, I believe, the family of Katie Hettinger, who has made starts in the Cars Tour and other late model series as well. This is absolutely huge to have a new organization coming into play. Now, obviously, someone like a Brett Holmes could end up in this organization. I believe one of the higher-ups at Brett Holmes Racing is going to be the crew chief for this organization, and they have also acquired the rights to the points from Brett Holmes Racing. So they're actually going to be in a really good position going into the race, and they should be able to qualify their way in. As for the driver they have for the final two races of this season, including on Friday, Brett Moffitt is one of the best free agents out there. He is someone that can absolutely evaluate your equipment and make your equipment better. Look what he did with AM Racing last year. He got that team 8 top 10s and a top 5. Since he's left, they've only had 2 top 10s this year. And he could have been there in the second car, but they obviously only had one car. They replaced him with Haley Deegan, and they have struggled ever since with other drivers. And Joey Logano is the only driver who, by the way, is a 2-time Cup champion. He basically is the only reason they've gotten top 10s. I think Brett Moffitt is actually going to run really strong in the final two races with this organization and team. And if I'm Hettinger Racing and I'm really happy to see how he ends up doing, and he does end up doing really well like I think he's going to do, you bring him back full-time next year. Brett Holmes is someone that, in my opinion, is very underrated. I know he's burned some bridges over the years, which has unfortunately affected him in this series, but in my personal opinion, he should be full-time with this team next year. He deserves a great opportunity with an organization and team, and I'm really hoping that Hettinger Racing, because this team could be really competitive if he's behind the wheel, and this could be someone that could end up challenging Corey Heim for the championship next year, because Brett Moffitt is a former champion. There was a chance he could have gone to front row this year. Obviously, they chose Lane Riggs, which I think Lane Riggs was a really good decision, by the way. But I think Brett Moffitt should be full-time with the team, and I really hope there's a good chance and possibility. We'll have to see what happens, but I would love to see Brett Moffitt get the chance to be full-time with Hettinger Racing in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Homestead TV ratings from this past weekend. As it was reported by Adam Stern earlier today, that NBC got a 1.31 rating and 2.344 million viewers for Sunday's Straight Talk Wireless 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway. That is up 1% and 4% from 2023, meaning it was up 1% in the rating and it was up 4% in the viewership from last year. This also, I believe, the fourth or fifth of the 7 or 8 points-paying races in the playoffs this year that have also been up in viewership throughout 2024. And I believe this also continues to bring the viewership up and make it better from 2023 to 2024. This is really, really good to see. If you missed out on the NASCAR Cup Series race at Homestead Miami Speedway, you missed an absolute classic and an absolute banger. One of the greatest NASCAR Cup Series races of all time, and I think that the ratings really proved that. Again, 2.34 million viewers on main NBC isn't the greatest thing in the world, but you do have to remember that the Formula One Mexican GP was going on at that time, and the ratings for that, I think they peaked at 1.6 million, though their average was 1.4 million. I think some of those viewers could have come over to NASCAR, but obviously, of course, they had the race going on there, and it was on broadcast as well, so it was a lot easier to watch that. But I think it's still good to see the ratings continue to go up, while people did not, of course, end up showing up to the race at Homestead, because unfortunately the crowd was not that really good for the Cup race at Homestead. They still had really good ratings for this weekend, and I hope that can continue for the final 2 races. There is going to be a new tire that they're going to be using, of course, at Martinsville, which could put on a really good show, and the championship race, hopefully that we can end up seeing some really, really good racing and see the ratings go up there. But unfortunately, I'm really worried that the championship race, because it's kind of done it the last couple of years, it's either kind of gone flat or it's gone down every year for really the last 10 years. But I'm glad to see the NASCAR continues to go up. Last year, the ratings went down early in the playoffs, but we've been up this year, which is really good to see, especially with Season 2 coming up for the Netflix show that NASCAR is doing once again. I do believe that we're going to see ratings continue to hopefully go up next year and more people can tune in, especially with NASCAR's version of Drive to Survive a little bit. I do think that the ratings being up is a really big win for NASCAR overall, and I'm glad to see the ratings continue to go up for a lot of these races, because they've been going up on a year-by-year basis or week-by-week basis, and I think this is really good to see that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday, that Junior Motorsports has sold mixed 6 figures worth of merchandise in the first few days after last week's popular reunion with Dale Jr. and Budweiser. Remember, we talked about this on a channel, I believe it was on Tuesday morning, if I'm not mistaken, that Dale Jr. and Budweiser are officially reuniting. Dale Jr. is going to drive the number 8 Budweiser car for Junior Motorsports at the South Carolina 400 at Florence Speedway on November 23rd. He is also planning to run other select races near the end of this year, and he plans to run select races in 2025 as well. The fact that Dale Jr. can still sell mid-6 figures is a really, really good thing, but it's also a little concerning to see that no other Cup driver, for the most part, is really moving the needle like Dale Jr. is. A guy who's 50 years old, who's been retired from the Cup Series now for nearly a decade at this point, is moving the needle like this. Dale Jr. still has a big, wide name, and people also, of course, know Dale Jr. outside of NASCAR. They know him outside of the sport. But it is very concerning to see that it's taken this long for someone to do this in really recent years. The only driver, in my opinion, that might be moving the needle like Dale Jr. is right now, maybe Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is selling a lot of dirt merchandise, and we know Kyle Larson may be one of the few drivers outside of NASCAR who is recognizable, that is in NASCAR, who's probably recognizable outside of the sport, because Kyle Larson has been doing a lot of great things and a lot of great things out on the racetrack. He's making some very viral moments also with some of the big things, and also having the partnership with Prime, with Logan Paul and KSI has probably also been helping a little bit with that as well. But I think it's really good to see that they're continuing to grow in just the first week alone. And I do think that that is only going to continue to grow as more merchandise rolls out. Because I do think you're probably going to end up seeing a lot more merchandise come around when it comes to junior motorsports in this area. I think it's good to see that more coming out when it comes to merchandise. Hopefully some of the other drivers like a Shane Van Gisbergen or Bubba Wallace or Ross Chastain or Kyle Busch next year could end up doing that, because I think it'd be really cool to see there being more merchandise coming out and we can see more numbers of figures. So I think it's crazy to see that Dale Jr., after being retired for so long from full-time racing, is still able to put up this much when it comes to sales, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Matt Mills, as it was officially confirmed on Monday afternoon that Matt Mills has been released from the hospital after being in the hospital for the last couple days. And it was also confirmed as well that Matt Mills has been cleared to race by Bob Cox, as reported, and will be able to race this weekend in the number 42 truck for Nice Motorsports. Let's flash back to a couple days ago. We talked about this on the channel on Monday, and we've talked about this on the channel quite a bit recently. But remember on Saturday during the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series race, Connor Jones got really frustrated going into turn number 3 and completely just flat out dumped Matt Mills going into turn number 3, and Matt Mills hit the outside wall extremely hard, and the truck ended up catching on fire. Now, Matt Mills did climb from his racetrack, but unfortunately inhaled a lot of smoke and was sent to the hospital for a couple of days. Connor Jones did release basically a half-ass apology, unfortunately. It seemed like it looked like it might have been AI generated. We're not entirely sure at this point. The first thing I want to say is, one, I am very happy to see that Matt Mills has been released from the hospital, because him being sent to the hospital for what ended up happening was just not acceptable on Connor Jones' part, in my honest opinion. Number two, we have not heard anything in regards to Connor Jones penalty-wise. There could have been a penalty earlier today, but there is a chance that by the time many of you are watching this, that there could be a decision in regards to a penalty coming for Connor Jones. And in my opinion, Connor Jones needs to be suspended at least for the remainder of this season. What Connor Jones did was not acceptable. Connor Jones has had a terrible reputation in the garage, not just on the NASCAR side of things, but also in the car store. We saw a lot of journalists, especially like Jordan Bianchi and Jeff Gluck, and many drivers as well, who have gone off on Connor Jones. And like I said, he's had a reputation for dumping people on the racetrack, wrecking a lot of people. And the problem is, unlike someone like Carson Hocevar, who has also been called out for doing stuff like this on the racetrack, Carson Hocevar can back it up with a lot of talent. Carson Hocevar has won 4 Truck Series races, and look what he's done in the Cup Series. He's been the best rookie this year, is likely going to win the Rookie of the Year honors, and is someone that many people proclaim could be a NASCAR Cup Series champion. Connor Jones has not even scored a single top 10 in nearly 20 Craftsman Truck Series starts. I get he is only 18 years old. And I get there's drivers around the age show a lot of maturity, but Connor Jones is not one of those drivers like a Connor Zilich or William Swalch who has shown a lot of maturity out on the racetrack. I just don't think that Connor Jones is ready, in my opinion, to be racing in the Truck Series like this. There's a guy in that organization who personally, in my opinion, should be racing over Connor Jones, and that is Luke Fenhaus. Luke Fenhaus has made 3 Truck Series starts this year, and Luke has scored 2 top 10s, and yet for some weird reason, he's not racing full-time, which does not make any sense to me. I guess the business is more important than having racing and credibility in this series. I really hope there's penalties and suspensions coming for Connor Jones. Again, we'll have to wait and see what NASCAR does decide to do, but I do believe that Connor Jones should absolutely be suspended for what happened on track, because his actions were unacceptable. The garage has been really frustrated with the things that Connor Jones has been doing, and I hope that he's able to get a suspension for this, and I'm glad to all see that Matt Mills is okay, and I'm very happy to see that Matt Mills has been cleared to race for sure this weekend at Martinsville. Really happy to see this nonetheless, and glad to see he's good to go to race this weekend at Martinsville Speedway. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, there were some interesting reports that came out surrounding Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch is definitely very frustrated that he is not allowed to be part of NASCAR's Netflix show, because unfortunately for Kyle Busch, he did not end up making the playoffs this year. Now, had it been by points instead of the winning you're in system, he would have made it over guys like Harrison Burton and Chase Briscoe, though again, and the other guys as well, like Joey Logano perhaps. But then again, he wouldn't have beat guys like Bubba Wallace or Chris Buescher or Ross Chastain. So who knows at this point. But it was continuing on where Kyle Busch says that he was sort of the catalyst to the process when he was with Joe Gibbs Racing and lost M&M's. They couldn't find a sponsor for him. He continued on by saying this says if teams had more revenue, there wouldn't be more sponsor moves for drivers, where sponsors really dictated what drivers end up getting to be part of the organizations. Beginning with the first part of things, we know, of course, that a couple years ago, Kyle Busch lost his ride at Joe Gibbs Racing. He had M&M sponsorship from basically 2008 when he joined the team up until the end of 2022, when it was confirmed that M&M's would not be back with the team in the Mars Group. Now, there had been a rumor about Oracle coming into play and sponsoring Kyle Busch at Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023. But that deal ended up falling through. And instead of going after kind of the sponsorship model that Kyle Busch has at Rich Choice Racing, they continued to want to go on with basically the same thing. And this, unfortunately, has also kind of affected Joe Gibbs another way, because it's expected most likely that FedEx will either be dropping more sponsorship from the team or most likely will be leaving the organization at the end of this year. There's a really good chance that is going to end up happening. And that's a big reason why Kyle Busch left the team to go to Richard Childress Racing. But continuing on, Kyle Busch is absolutely right. He's actually also says he is very supportive of 2311 and Front Row Motorsports. 2311 and Front Row, of course, are currently suing NASCAR at this moment. They're waiting for an injunction to get granted, which that is expected to be decided on November 4th. So about a week from now, we should be getting official word on that. But if the teams had more ways to get more revenue, which we do know with the new charter agreement that is coming into play, that the teams are expected to get the biggest share of the piece of the pie. We don't know how big of a percentage that's going to be, probably around 40 to 45%, but the teams are likely going to get the biggest share of the revenue on the charter deal. But what 2311 and Front Row are hoping for is maybe, one, a little bit more money, and also they're hoping for a way for charters to maybe perhaps end up becoming permanent. And of course, 2311 and Front Row are on the verge of losing their charters altogether. But I think it's very interesting to hear these comments from Kyle Busch, who is a former driver, of course, at Joe Gibbs Racing. And it's also no secret there was rumors about maybe going to 2311 at one point. I found out to be interesting, maybe working with Kurt Busch, maybe Carl Edwards at some point. That had been a rumor that had gone around at some point. But Kyle Busch obviously is driving for RCR right now. We obviously know that there's been rumors about him maybe wanting to leave the team. He had been interested in going back to JGR. But I think he's absolutely right about the sponsor side of things. We're kind of seeing it with Chandler Smith currently at the moment right now. Chandler Smith's future at Joe Gibbs Racing is very uncertain at the moment, and it's very likely at this point that we know at this point that Chandler Smith most likely will not be back at Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year, because you got William Sawalch, Brandon Jones, and of course Taylor Gray joining, not because of talent, but because of sponsors that they have. If they didn't have the sponsorship funding they had, they probably wouldn't be going to those rides next year, or some of them may not be going to the rides that they're going to, like a Brandon Jones. I think Kyle Busch is right about a lot of things that he said, and I think that he's absolutely speaking the truth when it comes to the sponsorship side of things, which I think there's definitely a lot of truth to that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about John Hunter Nemechek. Now, if you've been on social media over the course of the last 24 to 48 hours, and really the last week or so, you've been seeing a lot of rumors surrounding John Hunter Nemechek. Now, last week, right before the Las Vegas Motor Speedway Cup Series race, we kind of talked about this on the channel. They Couch Racer account, which has stirred up some stuff, and it's ran by Freddie Kraft and Brett Griffin. They basically put out on their Twitter page saying that a certain driver in a certain team needs to outperform their boss. Some thought maybe be Bubba Wallace or Tyler Reddick, but it wasn't those two drivers. Then everyone kind of put an inference down, and they kind of said it was John Hunter Nemechek. Now, earlier this week on Monday, it was reported by the NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia account, which has gotten things right at times, but has also gotten things wrong at times as well. They're saying that there's a rumor going around that John Hunter Nemechek could end up being out at Legacy Motor Club at the end of this year. And they're saying that potentially Corey Heim, who is currently a reserve driver for Legacy Motor Club in the NASCAR Cup Series, he is currently rumored to be the potential replacement for John Hunter Nemechek in 2025. Now, it is noted by the Couch Racer account once again earlier today that they do expect that John Hunter will be back behind the wheel of the 42 car for next year. Now, there have been rumors I also had heard about Riley Herbst maybe being a candidate for this team, but I think that's been denied at this point. Now, let's talk about John Hunter Nemechek. I do think that John Hunter Nemechek is a solid and a pretty all-right race car driver. You don't go and win 7 races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and be considered a bad driver. He won 7 races last year in Xfinity in the number 20 car. And he's outperformed Chandler Smith and Sheldon Creed what they did. And he's also won the same amount of races as Chandler Smith in the Xfinity Series on a part-time basis this year. I don't think John Hunter Nemechek is the problem at Legacy Motor Club. I think it's Legacy Motor Club as a whole. Legacy has continued to make a lot of big changes over there, and it has really affected their performance. They've hired crew chiefs. They've fired crew chiefs like Travis Mack. They hired Brian Campy very recently. They basically have gotten rid of their GM, Joey Gohan. They've also gotten rid of other people, part of the team and the organization. They've continued to make executive moves left, right, and center. For me, if you continue to make executive moves left, right, and center, it unfortunately affects you in a big way. There's a reason a team like Hendrick Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing have been able to see for so long. And when they did make moves, it did affect their performance. I personally think that John Hunter Nemechek is not the problem Legacy. I know he's had a bad year this year. He's had more top 10s than Eric Jones, by the way, 3 to be exact. But he's 34th in the points, and his average finish is like 26th or 27th or something like that this year. And he's had 13 finishes outside of the top 30. But I think that if he's struggling next year, then you start having conversations. It sounds most likely, of course, that Corey Heim is going to stay with Tricon Garage, but I find it very interesting that the future of John Hunter is certainly uncertain at the moment. And it's a shame, too, because John Hunter had kind of gone back down to the Truck Series after struggling in front row in Cup as a rookie, though. He did show some flashes. He did get a top 10 at Darlington in the first race back from COVID. He did show a lot of flashes of brilliance. But I also do think that a lot of it is legacy. We've seen him struggle. Eric Jones is a proven Cup winner, won 2 Southern 500s, including with, at the time, Petty GMS for this switch to Legacy in 2023. He really did perform great with that team a couple years ago. It's not that long ago when they were with Chevrolet. Legacy also is trying to build themselves up with Toyota and have their own thing. I feel like at this point, if you're Legacy Motor Club, you may not have any choice but to go ahead and partner up with Joe Gibbs Racing if you want to keep up having really, really good performances. Because in my opinion, them doing separate thing and not working heavily with Toyota has really affected them. And I think it's hurt their progress in a big way. Now, once they gather more data and more information, there's a really good chance that they will end up becoming this really strong, great team. But I really don't think that John Hunter Nemechek should be let go. I think Corey Heim is a really good driver. There's no denying that. But I think John Hunter is also a very good driver. And it would be a really big and really disappointing shame if John Hunter ended up losing his ride at Legacy Motor Club. Now, he probably would go back down the trucks, maybe a driver swap perhaps, where John Hunter goes back to Tricon, and then, of course, Corey Heim goes there. But I think there's also a really good chance that this rumor is not true, and that we'll continue to see John Hunter be with Legacy, which personally, I think he should end up staying with Legacy because he's done a really good job with Legacy Motor Club. Not done a great job, but I think he should be staying with them in 2025, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode as we're talking about Saudi Arabia. Now, if you were on social media yesterday, you probably saw this post that was going around. I can't remember exactly which account posted this, but there were certain events from Saudi Arabia in the Qiddiya circuit. Now, the Qiddiya circuit, for those who do not know, is a circuit that is basically being built in Saudi Arabia. It's basically kind of like a Mario Kart style track. There's going to be a 20-foot elevation going up. If you fall off the racetrack, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and you're going to come down. It's kind of like a Mario Kart style circuit. Now, this track is expected to be done by 2027 or 2028. But if you saw this, there was something that came around showing that one series that they are talking to potentially race in 2030 is NASCAR. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern last night that NASCAR is declining comment on being listed as in talks to bring a future race to Qiddiya in Saudi Arabia. But it has acknowledged exploring events in the Middle East before. This is not the first time we've heard rumors about NASCAR looking to go to the Middle East. Last year was reported in May after I think the Le Mans race back in June and May that they were interested in expanding and going more global, and the Middle East hasn't brought up as a potential possibility. When it came to street races, it was brought up that the Middle East series is certainly a possibility for NASCAR. Now, when I hear the word Saudi Arabia, I definitely question it. If anyone knows about Saudi Arabia and everything around it, there is a lot of bad things going around. Now, when it comes to Saudi Arabia, there probably would be a lot of money that comes into play. When it comes to the government in Saudi Arabia, they tend to spend a lot of money, and they're probably going to give NASCAR a lot of money. But personally, when it comes to international expansion, I really would not want to see a race in Qiddiya or Saudi Arabia. I think expanding to other countries would be a better way to go, in my opinion. Maybe we already know that we're going to Mexico in 2025, which of course they're expanding there. Now, obviously it won't be till 2030 most likely if we do go to Saudi Arabia. Why not go into countries like England instead? Like Wembley, or go and race there perhaps? Why not go to countries, of course, like Germany and France that have racetracks built up currently at the moment? Why not go to Brazil? There's rumors that NASCAR could be going to Interlagos in 2026. Why not go there instead of going to a country like Saudi Arabia? To me, I just am not the biggest fan of NASCAR going to a country like Saudi Arabia. I get that NASCAR will be doing it for money, and then we know the Saudis will be bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars. You also got to think about the teams as well. Teams, especially like 2011 and Front Row, who haven't signed the charter agreement at this point, they would not be able to end up going to this place, or they wouldn't end up going because they wouldn't have a charter. Probably only the teams that are chartered currently at the moment would end up going there. To me, I just am not the biggest fan of this move on a personal basis. I don't want NASCAR to be going to Saudi Arabia. I think they should be focusing on what's happening in the United States and looking to expand in the U.S. on the domestic presence in the U.S. instead of just going to the Middle East. If you're going to expand, go to like Europe, go to Le Mans. Go there like you did with the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Go to somewhere outside, like go to Canada. We should probably be going to Canada at this point, considering that NASCAR has a big Canadian audience. And look at my viewership and demographic, and Canada's have got a big presence. And Australia is also another one. We've seen a lot of new Australian viewers come in, obviously for Shane Van Gisbergen. So I think that would be the move to go with, in my humble and honest opinion. I think that would definitely be the way to go. I would not be the biggest fan if we go to Saudi Arabia. I get that money would be the big way forward, and I understand that NASCAR wants to make as much money as possible. I just don't like this move if it truly ends up happening, but the fact that this is getting brought up multiple different times tells me there's a really good chance and a very strong possibility that this is going to happen. I'm not a big fan of this move. I don't think it's a great decision if they truly end up doing it, in my opinion, but it does sound like there's a really good chance of this happening, which is definitely a big shame because I'm not a big fan of this move. Like I said, I really hope it doesn't end up happening, but I do think the fact it continues to be brought up tells me there's a really good chance and a very strong possibility that we're likely to be going there in the future, and I'm not the biggest fan. I know it's hypothetical at this point, but the fact that NASCAR has declined on it tells me there's a really good chance and possibility that this is going to happen in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Preece once again. Now, we've talked about Ryan Preece quite a bit on this channel. There's been a lot of rumors circulating over the course of the last couple months that Ryan Preece could be headed to RFK Racing in 2025. Now, NASCAR Cup Series Managing Director Brad Moran was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio yesterday. There was a wet weather tire test that happened basically earlier this week on Monday, where they're testing basically wet weather tires on 1.5 miles. Alex Bowman was there for the Hendrick camp, or the Chevy camp. John Nemechek was there in the 42 car for Toyota. And actually, Ryan Preece wasn't testing a Stewart Haas racing car, but was testing the number 60 car for RFK Racing. And a lot of people like myself are theorizing that Ryan Preece was going to be headed to RFK Racing in 2025. Earlier today, while Brad Moran was discussing that, Brad Moran pretty much just leaked that Ryan Preece would be driving the number 60 car for RFK Racing in 2025. Now, if you've been paying attention, there's been a lot of rumors circulating about this over the course of the last couple months. It goes back to a report from Adam Stern on August 15th, when it was initially reported that RFK Racing was expected to pick up the Kroger sponsorship going into 2025. Originally, it was looking to head over to Joe Gibbs Racing, but then obviously it got confirmed they'd be leaving JTG to go over to RFK Racing in 2025. And then it got reported by Jordan Bianchi about a week or so after this initial report came out that they were close to finalizing a deal, and they were very close to announcing this deal officially being confirmed. We've been hearing Brad Keselowski kind of delay the announcement at this point, but Brad's been kind of saying that they were very close to potentially announcing a third car. RFK Racing's initial plans had been to eventually expand to 3 full-time entries for the future. And it sounds like we're very, very close to having that officially announced, with Ryan Preece being the driver. And then it gets confirmed, kind of like how Christopher Bell kind of accidentally announced that Chase Briscoe was going to be driving for the Joe Gibbs Racing. Confirmed that in New Hampshire about a week or so prior to being officially announced and confirmed. We got the official confirmation from the series director, Brad Moran, which I find to be very, very funny. Now, obviously, Ryan Preece's name has been linked to RFK Racing, like I said, for the last couple months. Now, Ryan Preece, in my opinion, has been linked to this because of the sponsorship side of things. Kroger has worked with Ryan Preece in the past when Ryan Preece, of course, drove for JTG Doherty Racing from 2019 through 2021. And Ryan Preece had a really good working relationship with the Kroger brand. So that's why they're likely to choose him. There's also a lot of people in RFK Racing who really believe in Ryan Preece. They think Ryan Preece has not been able to show his potential capabilities. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Ryan Preece, when he drove in the lower series for teams like Joe Gibbs Racing, he got a couple wins with them in 2017 and, of course, in 2018. And then, of course, in the truck series for DGR before they switched to Toyota and became Tricon Garage, he was really good with that team and got a couple wins at National Super Speedway. In the Cup Series, since returning in 2023, he has been with Stewart-Haas Racing. The first year he drove full-time for Stewart-Haas Racing, Kevin Harvick went winless and had an all-right year, but SHR completely struggled in 2023. And Ryan Preece recently, he's been on fire. I think he's had 5 top 10 finishes the last 7 races. And he's been close to being the second best of the SHR camp behind Chase Briscoe. I think that Ryan Preece has been really starting to show the potential that he has. And while I do think if he truly does end up at RFK Racing, which sounds very likely at this point, I think Ryan Preece, while he won't be the best at RFK next year, I do think that Ryan Preece will end up being a very solid driver at RFK Racing in 2025. Realistically, I think he will get some top 5s. I think some top 10s are definitely doable, and I think he will be an outside playoff contender. Now, the other big question is, if this is true, where are they going to get the charter from? There have been some people saying maybe they're going to pick up one of the SHR charters and swoop up from 20 through 11 in front row. I don't think that is going to be the case. Because those 2 charters currently are being held by NASCAR at this point, and NASCAR, of course, has to provide the charter. Where a lot of people think this charter is going to be coming from is Rick Ware Racing. Rick Ware Racing, of course, has a really tight alliance with RFK Racing, and many people theorizing, like myself, that the 15 charter currently owned by Rick Ware might be leased over to RFK Racing in 2025. We obviously seen Justin Haley have been rumored at one point to go RFK Racing. He, of course, left the organization very recently. But we've seen some drivers who, driven from RFK Racing, get an opportunity for Rick Ware. So what would this mean for Rick Ware Racing? Well, it sounds like if they do run a second car, it might be part-time. My best guess is probably going to end up being drivers part of Haas Factory Team in Xfinity, like Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer perhaps, and maybe some other drivers in the Ford camp like a Joey Hand and JJ Yeley, who could end up getting behind the wheel of that seat on a part-time basis next year. As for Ryan Preece RFK, I think Ryan Preece, like I said, is a really solid race car driver who can and show, when he's got good equipment, he can show a lot of potential. I don't think, like I said, he has gotten a fair shake. I go back to last year at that race in Martinsville in the spring where Kyle Larson won. People forget Ryan Preece led, I think, ended up leading the most laps of that race, if I'm not mistaken. I think he led over 120 laps of the event and was extremely strong, but unfortunately got trapped back a little bit farther in the field because he just had bad luck and didn't have the best pit stop, got a speeding penalty, and of course had to restart at the rear. He could have won that race in extremely dominant fashion because the next-gen car just did not race that great and still, to this day, has not raced great at Martinsville. But I do think that Ryan Preece is a driver that has a lot of potential. If this does end up getting confirmed, it will be really, really huge. For the fact you've got the series director kind of leaking at this point tells me that this announcement is coming very, very soon. I have heard there's an announcement potentially this week, but there's no confirmation on that at this point. We're just going to have to kind of wait and see when that announcement is going to happen. It couldn't happen at any given time. I don't think this is coming from the lawsuit at this point. I think it's coming from something different. So we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens in regards to that and when this announcement will officially come out. But it does sound like it's getting very close to being announced, and it sounds like we are very close to hearing Ryan Preece officially heading to RFK Racing in 2025, which I think is really exciting because I think Ryan Preece will be able to finally show his potential capabilities in 2025 with the RFK Racing team. So, that is good for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, and notify when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How do you think Ryan Preece is going to do at RFK? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about NASCAR potentially heading to Saudi Arabia in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major news breaks throughout the day, we'll discuss it here live on the channel. We're also going to have Xfinity Series race picks later today for Martinsville. Then tomorrow we'll have Cup race picks for Martinsville. And of course, we will have the paint scheme video. Friday, we'll have a NASCAR news video wrapping up this week, and we also will, of course, have the Truck Series race review dropping on the channel, and then, of course, we'll have race reviews and other stuff dropping throughout the weekend at Martinsville. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.